because the more people come on, the better. Boom. All right. So that being said, as everybody figured it out, how to put it onto their Facebook page. Hi, everybody.
Hi, Elaine.
For those of you tuning in, this is episode 34 of Celebrating the Brand Ambassador. This is my first time having more than 2 people on as my guests, so I'm very excited. And also very much looking forward to the conversation. These are all, for those of you who might not know, we're all ex-Diageo folks. So we've all worked for the same company, and now we're all doing our own things. But I'm really excited to have with me Stephanie Jordan and Tim Etherington Judge of Avallen Calvados. And Robert Pallone of Chinalo Passion fruit liqueur. Hi, guys. Hello. All right. So the way I always like to start off the show is, and this is a very interesting show because this is, I try to do once a month where there are former brand ambassadors who are now brand owners to kind of talk about, because now you know both sides of the business, working for somebody who had massive budgets to now doing it on your own with tiny little budgets and trying to get your brand out there and build something very unique and very different. And all of you guys all have a very unique proposition for your products. So I'm going to start off with have everybody introduce themselves and the products that you founded and a little bit of your backstory. So Stephanie, I'll start off with you.
Super. Well, we're delighted to be here, Elaine, and it's nice to get the old gangs back together. So yeah, I'm Stephanie Jordan. I was born in London to a British mother, raised in France with my Colombian father. So a bit of a mix kind of cocktail in essence. But I suppose it's really crucial to everything that I have done since becoming of legal drinking age, because I was raised in a world of wine. Both my parents worked in the drinks industry, and so that hugely influenced sort of those primitive years. But I went to a business school in Lyon, the capital of gastronomy, graduated and joined Diageo as a grad. So not a traditional brand ambassador career path, but I was so passionate about liquids. I did my WSET advance when I was 18. I was, pretty determined that I was going to go into the drinks field. My original plan was to save the Beaujolais. But my mum, rightly so, advised me, and she was and is a marketeer herself. And she said, if I really, really wanted to save the Beaujolais, I needed to understand global branding. And no better than Diageo when it came to the world of spirits. And, her belief at the time was the spirits had a lot to teach wines, especially French wines. And so that is the why. Ultimately, I was in the Spanish business initially. And then I ended up in a BA role, which is not usually what would happen in these kind of grad schemes. But again, due to this kind of passion I had, and to be perfectly frank, because I think they wanted a woman in the role. So I ended up as an in-market brand ambassador, covering Madrid across all the Diageo Reserve portfolio. And kind of just grew through the ranks, ended up in the Indian Ocean as a customer marketing manager, went back into the more traditional career path. Didn't love it, really missed educating, world class at the time was so fascinating to me, and just wanting to be out in trade. And, when you do the Indian Ocean, we're covering places like the Seychelles and Mauritius, which, yes, paradise, but also from a capabilities perspective, the guy making drinks today, tomorrow could be the guy cleaning the pool. It didn't really seem to matter. So that also felt frustrating when I was following my kind of other colleagues around the world, sipping on martinis at the American bar and sort of couldn't quite get a Negroni right out in Reunion Island. I managed to venture my way back as the global brand ambassador of Tanqueray. The added bonus of speaking Spanish in Spain and LATAM being key markets for the gin boom at the time. Again, the added bonus of being a woman, to be frank, they wanted a woman in the role. And so that was how I met Tim. That is how I came to be a GBA. And, the rest is now kind of history. But since then, left big Diageo to create a planet positive, kind of planetary and socially minded drinks brand called Avallen, which has a mission basically to show the world that we can continue to enjoy delicious tasting tipples without leaving the planet with a hangover.
I love it. I love it. That is a long way around, but all those experiences, which we're going to talk about later on, is what has shaped you as a person and become the success that you've had today. So amazing experiences. And Tim, yourself?
Well, Stephanie's just stolen all of our taglines.
I did.
It's a hard one to follow up there.
Well, then you don't have to say it. You can just give us a little of your background.
My background to being a brand ambassador is far more traditional than Steph. So I grew up in a rural part of the UK that has a lot of tourism. And so growing up as a kid, the first jobs you get, the only jobs in the summer are working in kind of bars and restaurants and takeaways. So I went down that route, ended up behind the bar, discovered the wonderful world of cocktails, working at a beach resort in Falmouth. And then that was where my kind of adventure really began. I fell in love with the stories and the craft and the artistry, and went all in on becoming a cocktail bartender. So my mum passed away in 2005 when I was in my 20s. And that was the kind of the inspiration for me to go all in. So I got a one-way plane ticket and flew to New Zealand, which is still the best country in the world if you've never been there. And then, I got into the cocktail scene there. Got a little job in a bar called Sweets. Won a few competitions. Realized that you could travel the world doing this. And in 2009, I moved to India. So the Taj Mahal Palace Hotel, which was the big famous hotel in Mumbai, that was subject to the terrorist attacks in 2008. So you might have seen it on TV, on fire. It's a big, beautiful, old-fashioned hotel.
Sorry, that wasn't just the way you said it. On fire.
Yeah, the police set it on fire. A part of it on fire. They actually set the bar, the harbour bar, on fire to flush out the terrorists. Because they were holed up in the restaurant that was above the bar.
Jesus.
So I went there to help them reopen the bars after the attacks. And it was the oldest bar in India. So it's the first license that was ever granted to sell liquor in the on-trade in India. And I did that for a year, working in this very prestigious, beautiful hotel. And the reason I went there was to go and learn hospitality from these incredible people. I'd sat there like a lot of the world, watched on TV as the 3 days these terror attacks happened, and I thought I knew hospitality. I thought it was kind of like making sure that when someone came to the bar, they had a glass of water and a napkin and maybe a bowl of snacks. And I thought that was hospitality when people came to a bar. And then I was hearing stories about these people who risked their lives. They get in the way of the terrorists to try and save their guests.
Wow.
Numerous, I met a chef who had bullets all down his arm, like still embedded in his arm.
Wow.
Because he'd got in the way of gunfire to try and save some of their guests. And I was like, for me, that was
another level.
Yeah. And I wanted to learn hospitality from these people that risked their lives to complete strangers. So that's why I went there, did that for a year, and then joined Diageo from there. They came to me and said, Uncle Diego needs a brand ambassador in India for the reserve portfolio, and we'd really love you to come on board. Joined from there, had a whole host of gigs at Diageo. So I was the first reserve ambassador for India, the first reserve ambassador for sub-Saharan Africa, which is a real adventure and one of my favorite regions in the world. And then eventually found my way to be the global bullet ambassador. Which is what I was doing that when I think I met you. I remember the first time I met you drinking martinis down in the Bosphorus in Turkey.
Yeah, it was. That is when we all met, and I've learned more about you in the last 2 days than I knew. I didn't know about you in India.
And during my time at Diageo, obviously met Steph as part of the World Class program and formed a great friendship, kind of like brother and sister. So when we both left Diageo at around the same time, it was an obvious thing for us to kind of join the forces together, try and do something fabulous. But we will talk about Avallen in a bit, I guess.
Yeah, we will definitely expand upon it. I just want to say hello because two of Robert's and I's old colleagues actually stopped in, Robert Gonzalez and Manuel. Hi, Manuel. Hi, Robert. Thanks for.
I'm still trying to figure this out, but hello, guys. Good to see you.
You're a celebrity. Everyone.
Everyone can see. So Robert, thank you, Tim. And I really have. I've learned more about you in the last 2 days. I didn't know about all your adventures in Africa and India. I just knew you from Bullet and from our ventures in Turkey, which we all had, and also found out a lot about Robert in Turkey, that he had all this family, that he's been to Turkey like 100 times and still hasn't made it to the Blue Box. I remember that, and we never made it there while we were there.
It was a pit stop when my parents lived in Bahrain, so
oh wow,
didn't get to explore too much. But.
Yeah, fair enough. But Robert, give us a little of your background.
So my background, I actually wanted to be a pilot my whole entire life. So I was like super dorky into aviation. My parents worked for American Airlines, so I was like blessed with going on, great trips. My favorite part of the trip was like the airplane. I was always like, are we going to fly on the 777? That's what I wanted to do my whole life, and then went to school for it. And then like when I was finishing up my commercial, I think it was like 21. And it's like long hours, you have to sit in the plane, and it was very rare because I cannot sit still if you don't know me well. And I don't like to follow rules, and I don't like to do anything in orders. So obviously being a pilot, like that was not a good fit. So I never knew what I wanted to like really do outside of that, but I'd always been in hospitality ever since I was like 15. My first job was at a country club. It was actually a really nice, fancy country club. And that was kind of, I think the inspiration is like, I would see all these wonderful bottles. My parents, got to travel, and I got to travel. So they had a nice bar collection. I was so intrigued with, the different labels, and, that you could taste, these different countries, and have a little piece of that country. So that was kind of the inspiration of, I guess, bringing me into the hospitality world even more. And so when I didn't know what I wanted to do, I'd moved to Miami. I thought I was going to finish flying here, and then continued hospitality, worked in restaurants, bartended, was a server. I started off as like a food runner and bar back. And so, I think it was like when I was working on trying to become an assistant sommelier, I was getting super dorky into wine. And I was at a distributor trade show, and we had this wine. I'll never forget, it was Michael Honig wine. And he used to come in. It was one of our house wines. And I was telling him all about it. And he was like, wow, you seem very passionate about this. Have you ever thought about selling? And I was like, not really. And I knew some of the distributor reps, that we dealt with, because we would do blind tastings. And so anyways, I started asking them questions, and they were like, actually, we're hiring. And so I started applying for both jobs. I got hired with Republic National. So did the whole portfolio. I was selling. I had key accounts in Miami, which was great. So I was selling, wine, spirits, even sake, beer. So that just expanded my knowledge of, more so outside of the wine world. I wasn't too much into like spirits at that point, but was really kind of gravitating into it a little bit more because the cocktail scene started taking off, and I still did bartending. I did everything when I was at the Satai Hotel. A little piece of that. I was thinking maybe I wanted to go work in hotels. Thank God I didn't, because I hated working in hotels. But so I ended up, I love selling, but I was more of like creating marketing. So then a job came up with being a brand ambassador. And first it was for tequila and also the reserve rums. And they were, I didn't know what the brand was what the brands were until actually my third interview. And then they asked me, they told me it was for Jose Cuervo, Don Julio, and then it was, Myers Rum, Captain Morgan, with the emphasis on Zacapa and this other innovation brand, Orinoco. And so they're like, which one would you like to choose? And I was thinking in my head, I was like, well, I could only go up with Zacapa because it was new. It was like Diageo had just... Yeah. Well, they asked me, which it was for both jobs. So yeah, they asked me which one I would be interested in, but I think they wanted somebody who spoke fluent Spanish for the Don Julio job. But I actually said Zacapa, and I appreciated it because it had, all the aspects of, the wine world with the ports and the sherry. So started doing that. My first title was Reserve Rum Ambassador. And then after that, it was just for the Southeast region. Then I became, I think 2 years later, the national ambassador for Zacapa. And then, that's where we met. We actually met on the first trip. I think it was my first week.
We went to Guatemala.
Elaine and I went to Guatemala. It was a crazy trip. And then after that, I kind of started working on my own brand, and it's not something that I was like, let me start a passion fruit liqueur. It's almost like something that a destiny in a way, So it was kind of the right place, right time. My partner was working in the Dominican Republic, starting a coconut water, and his plant manager, which he had poached from, and when he was in Mexico, was starting up Vita Coco's plant down there. And then he was also consulting for Centenario and Casa Nacho. He came from 10 generations of making wine, spirits, and liqueurs. That's what he went to school for. That was his passion. So in his spare time, being in the Dominican Republic, he was making these fresh fruit liqueurs. And he really wanted to get in and start a company making fresh fruit liqueurs because he had this documentation from his great-great-great-grandfather in 1763. Was making fruit liqueurs for the Majesty of Austria. So my friend kept telling me about this, knowing that I was in the alcohol business. And so he brought these fruit liqueurs back to me. I think it took like a year, 2 times. They got confiscated by customs. And then he finally brought them back, and I'm like, wow, these are really cool. These are interesting. They actually have fresh fruit in it. And so I took it to the 2 pickiest, people that I know, and they think everything sucks and cheesy. You probably know him, Gabe and a lot at Bar Lab, Broken Shaker. And so I was thinking, depending on how much they think this sucks, like this will kind of give me a gauge on, should we start this? And they were like, wow, these are cool. Nobody's doing this. And they're like, who's making this? I'm like, some weird Austrian guy in my friend's kitchen. They're like, we should start a company. So,
Robert, I'm going to stop you right there. So Tim and Steph, who did you use as your testers for the brand?
No one.
Oh, that's a good question.
Well, I don't think we did at all.
No.
I think that we had each other, and that mirror that we had and the accountability we had to one another is really what made us kind of get everything out so fast. And yeah,
I like it. I like the confidence.
I think, I also think like,
so that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, and I think that because Robert was doing something that's different, there's like passion fruit liqueur is not a category.
Yeah.
Really, but we had stepped into a category that's already existing with Calvados. So it wasn't like we were trying to see if people liked Calvados, because we knew that it was an existing category that's quite large, and so I think for us it was a lot easier in that regard.
Yeah, and we managed to sell our whole first production to 4 distributors, and they hadn't even tried the liquid.
Wow. Yeah. That's amazing.
So I don't know if it was the gift of the gab or if it was the real purpose and intent behind the brand, but there was just a trust that by default the liquid would be banging.
That's awesome, and we're going to talk about that, the reputations that everybody's kind of built to kind of build that confidence. And Robert, as Tim was saying, like a passion fruit liqueur wasn't a category, so for you to expand into it, like once you started developing, and I know it took you a while, like what was your vision when you first launched? Like, who was your target market? Like, who are you going after, and has it changed at all?
So yeah, it was dealing with the fresh fruit liqueur. There's I think there's a couple of passion fruit liqueurs and fruit liqueurs out there, but I don't know if they're adding as much fresh fruit. So it was like I wanted to do something. This is the old world style of how fresh fruit liqueurs before natural flavors came about. So, kind of my travel experience, I loved vintage things. My parents were collectors of like vintage things too. So when I was creating the brand, and I was a huge fan, I'm half Italian. My nonna was from Italy. So, I loved like Chinaro and Campari and like these old school, Amaros, and the labels just kind of had like this like cool kind of like rich, fashion history, like timeless, iconic. So that was a huge inspiration. So I was always like, I kind of boiled it down when I was working with graphic designers, is it's, picture like Chanel or Ferragamo or like, Oscar de la Renta, he was from the Caribbean, but, was traveling to the Caribbean in the late 50s, early 60s, something like tropical vintage Caribbean chic. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of like was the passion and the drive, and I guess the strategy of kind of building the brand, kind of giving it that timeless old school feel.
No, which is very, very cool. It's a beautiful bottle. Absolutely.
Thank you.
And Tim and Steph, I know like you guys have a very interesting story behind an inspiration for why you created this brand. So who wants to tell the story?
Okay.
Big ginger brother.
Steph's always in charge, so I just do what she says.
Smart man.
Yeah, it's a very different story. So when Steph and I left, we both left Diageo around the same time for different reasons. And we're good friends. We kept in touch. I went off to do Healthy Hospos. Steph went off to do her consultancy, Drinking Out Loud. But we kept in touch, and then we kept talking about starting a brand and ideas, and one thing that came to us that was if we did anything at all, it had to really be true to who we were as people. We'd spent about 6 years each working for Diageo, working on someone else's dream, working on someone else's projects, and not being, not living as we are as people, and not to our passions and to what's important to us. So when we said if we're going to do something together, it has to be really true to who we are as people. And it all kind of kicked off when I missed a flight back from Amsterdam back to London one night, and I called Steph from the airport. I was like, I missed my flight. Can I crash at yours tonight? And she's like, yeah, come over. So back to Steph's, bottle of wine on the table, nice dinner, and we started talking about it, and we just said, right, let's fucking do this. Let's create.
How much have you got? Not a lot. How much have you got? Not a lot. Is it enough? I don't know.
Yeah,
I don't know.
Who knows? But let's try. Let's give it a shot.
Yeah.
So we sat down and we said, right, it's got to be the most important thing that has to be true to ourselves as people. What's important to us? So for me, I've been a lifelong campaigner for environmental issues. So I've chained myself to gas stations. I've campaigned against ExxonMobil and BP and Shell, and I've planted trees, and I've done all sorts of stuff. And Steph grew up in rural France, so to Steph, terroir and the land is super important and really part of who she is as a person. So we said, right, these two things are really, really important. And can we tie those two things in together into creating a company that solves a problem? We both believe that if we were to have our own company, it's got to exist for more than just to make money. It's got to exist to try and solve a problem in the world. And we said that, the biggest problem that we could think of was the climate crisis and climate change and the catastrophic biodiversity loss that we're seeing. And we said, can we use our skills and our experience and our knowledge to try and create a company that does it a little bit? You're not going to solve climate change by drinking Calvados. But
you'll enjoy it a lot more, though.
Yeah, you can. And we can be part of the solution instead of being
climate change while drinking something really lovely.
Exactly. It's just have a good time and do good. And let's be part of the solution rather than part of the problem. Mm-hmm. So that's what led us to the kind of the mission, which was to create the world's most planet positive spirits brand. And once we had that mission statement kind of nailed down, then it was like, all right.
Every decision stems from that.
Yeah, what the fuck are we going to do? we knew, right? We said, right, no gin. The world does not need any more gin. There's enough great gin in the world.
No Chinalo. The Chinalo's too good already.
Yeah, Robert had nailed passion fruit liqueur, so we can do that.
So Philip had nailed that.
Yeah, exactly.
So we said, right, let's be true to this mission and ask some questions. And if we ask the right questions, the answer will reveal itself to us. So we said, right, we're going to be true to this mission. We go right back to the beginning. We ask the question, what's the best raw material to make alcohol from? Not from the usual considerations of price and flavor, but let's look at the environment and say, from an environmental perspective, what raw material is the best? Is it cereal grains? Is it sugarcane? Is it agave? Is it grapes? Is it apples? Is it something else completely? And all the research that we did, and we looked at different metrics like climate or carbon emissions, biodiversity loss, water consumption, pesticide and fertilizer use. That piece of research led us to apples.
There, Stephanie.
6 p.m. in Amsterdam.
There you go. Avallen o'clock. And that's what led us to apples. And then once we we'd done that research. We said, right, we've got to do something with apples. It was an easy step then to go to Calvados. Say, right, we're going to do a Calvados.
Yeah.
And then everyone went, what? Why would you do a Calvados? Only old grannies drink that, and then the more we looked into the category, yeah, and that's what we find. Like bartenders really, and people who know drinks really love Calvados. But if you look at the category, it's so boring. Steph, your turn now.
Besides us.
I mean,
No, that's the story. I think it's Robert's turn, but no. And I go back to your original question, Lane, around like who did we ask or who did we kind of get feedback from? I think it was once we'd landed kind of the category and the idea, that was the overwhelming kind of confidence, which was people love Calvados. Like whether or not there was this sustainable mission behind it, people love Calvados, and we couldn't understand that there was all this love, and yet it wasn't on any cocktail menu, at least not in the UK. Mm-hmm. And none of the big global groups had one, so it just felt like there was a real untapped commercial opportunity as well, ultimately, right? Otherwise, we could have just been an apple spirit.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And I want to explore. I was going to say, explore it before we get there, because I definitely want to talk about like what you think is going to change. Like, now that having people getting into the Calvados, like yourself, getting into the Calvados category and kind of changing the game, hopefully then it will start ending up on menus. But actually, I know Robert has, before we get there, Robert, you have a very funny story. We're talking about raw materials, about passion fruit. Like, this is not something that everybody gets into or knows about. In America, it's not even something we grow here. So tell us about like your difficulties of actually getting your passion fruit for your brand itself and all the things you had to go through.
That's a long story. I'll make it as brief as possible because there's been so many of them. I mean, it's like 3 years long. So, at first, we were trying to source passion fruit. And we were going to larger suppliers. I was in a different country. I didn't know the country well, my partner and I. And we were calling people up, hey, do you have passion fruit? And they're like, how much do you need? And we're like, probably like 5 pounds, at the first time. And they're like, you could just buy that at the grocery store, And they're like, we don't sell that much. Because we were just doing like test samples. And then, we started scaling up, and it was becoming a hard time trying to get to procure passion fruit. So we went to smaller suppliers, and then one day they'd have passion fruit, the other day they didn't. One day they had, I don't know, it'd be like 15 pounds of it or 20 pounds. That was much more than that. But anyways, we ended up finding this botanist along the way, and he was like, I heard you guys are looking for passion fruit. We're like, yes, we are. He was like, well, what kind do you want? And I was like, good ones. And he was like, well, there's many different varietals. And I was like, okay, this makes sense. Like he knows what he's talking about. And our first master blender was like, we have to do this correctly. We have to be in charge of the fruit, and we have to cure it right away with alcohol. And I was like, okay. So yeah, we started growing our own passion fruit. We created our own hybrid of passion fruit by crossing 3 different varietals. He had a test farm, and then we outgrew that test farm, and then we got another farm, and then from there we ended up going down a rabbit hole of like going 8 miles away from this place, and because one of the people that we met there was doing these eco resorts, and he was like, I need somebody who's into like permaculture and organic. He was like, can I steal them from you? I have land. You can grow your passion fruits there. And I was like, why are we going to move this, land out there? And I had never been. My partner had been first. It's on the north coast of the island called Samana. And the main road wasn't complete there. And it took us like over 8 hours to get there. It was like 3 a.m. Your phone doesn't work. There's no GPS. There's no road. There was no electricity. There was no lights. We finally found it. I was like, oh my gosh, this was the worst trip ever. What are we doing? And then he had this little beach hut. He had like 7 beach huts that were hooked up to generators. And then I slept on one that was like not even finished. I was getting eaten by mosquitoes, but I could hear the beach. And then a chicken, of course, is going off at like 5 o'clock in the morning. And I'm like, this is miserable. Yeah. And I'm like, let me go see the ocean. Of course, there's just like all this like fog out there. And I'm like, what the hell? And then it finally rises. I was like, oh, it's the most beautiful place ever. And then, got to learn about the eco things, resorts that my friend is doing, eco practices. So I was like, okay, this is cool. This is going to be our home. And kind of ironic is, our first farm, which was in the middle of the country, we were calling El Valle de Chinola. We put that on our label. And the actual town within Samana, the Providence, is called El Valle. So I didn't even think I realized it till it was like the second or third trip. I'm like, wait a minute, this town is called El Valle. Like our farm is actually in El Valle. This is actually the El Valle de Chinola. So that was pretty cool. And then it was like, just dealing with passion fruit. I didn't know much about passion fruit, but I could talk to you probably about an hour about passion fruit. First we fabricated real quickly. We fabricated 2 containers.
Remember the part about being brief?
Yeah. We fabricated 2 containers. We were juicing everything, cutting everything by hand. And then we outgrew that. And luckily we found this new supplier that had this handmade Italian equipment that was only for passion fruit. We're like, okay, this is perfect. Like we can bring our passion fruits there. They can juice for us. Anyways, they were rolling it and we did about 900 cases. And the next week we're getting ready to ship and it looks like a lava lamp. And we're like, what the fuck happened? How did this happen? And then we realized, the skins have pectin in it. So it released too much pectin. So we had this funky science lab looking project. So that was one thing. There's been many other things, but
yeah. I talk about some of the things you guys all learned while launching them. I'm sure there was a lot of some things that happened that if you look back now, you're like, oh God, I wish we could have avoided that one. But I guess you do learn about.
You live and you learn.
I was gonna say, and going back on the Apple thing, it's like, what do the people at Calvados in Normandy think about this? Like about you guys,
Oh, this is super interesting question given what's happened today.
What happens today?
Well, initially they were like, c'est quoi les Anglais là? Right, fine. Then they kind of like rallied around and were like, well, Avallen, we're not allowed because it's not a traditional Normandy bottle. So it's not written in the AOC, but they were going to change the AOC. So the AOC would say that it had to be a traditional Normandy bottle. I'm like, okay. But all our comms and our kind of conversations were, we're here to do good. We care about the category. It isn't just about this one brand. We truly believe that one tide can raise all boats. We know what we're doing. We've got the global experience. We believe in the quality of what you guys are making. You guys need to start understanding that you have a huge competitive advantage because you are probably the most sustainable spirits category in the world. We're going to do some research. We're going to help shine a light on that for you. And so then Avallen as a brand is its own thing. Like it is a Calvados, but we've got our ethos, our culture, etc. But all the work we have done has been to the benefit of the category. And so they then about a year in really started to understand that because it's the first time the category is back in growth in the UK. We have had an insane amount of coverage, so much so that they let us join the syndicate and the AOC. So we've actually gone and sat in meetings in Normandy with them. And I suppose the thing that happened today that Tim was commenting on is that one of the kind of more traditional heritage houses, which is Christian Drouin, his son Guillaume, we've been on the phone to him quite a few times because inspired by our life cycle carbon analysis, went on and did his own, has also been able to prove that Christian Drouin Calvados is climate positive due to the due to the fact that apples grow on trees and trees sequester carbon. And so much so that he's also now launching an eco-totes in the refillable closed loop technology in Paris, which we just went live in 6 months prior in the UK. So it's almost like a full circle, but Tim and I obviously have this chat and it's really bonkers that in 2 years, we are able to impact a category at that level, and it's a good thing, right?
Incredible.
You need brands to create a category, otherwise.
Yeah, and Christian Drouin is definitely, one of the foremost, right? They are the
exactly. And the bigger part, I think, in the end, is that it gives us all credibility in what we're doing.
Mm-hmm.
And I think having almost that kind of validation from a really traditional producer, which is, I mean, it's beautiful stuff and how it's made and where it's made, and to have them look to us and go, ha, you're right. And that's true to us as well. And we should talk about that. And that's great.
That's incredible. And Tim, I saw you about to hold, because I know we were all talking about this before we went on about the bottle crisis. And Tim, I know for the brand you guys started using, why don't you talk about, hold it up, the new system that was created in Asia.
All right, I'm going to try and hold it up. I've got a broken arm, and it's really heavy. So
we'll move your camera down.
There you go.
So explain what that is, because not everybody knows.
So this is a closed loop distribution system for spirits. So think of it as kind of like a beer keg, but for spirits. So it's a glass, aluminium, and recycled plastic container that contains 4.5 liters, which is a six bottle case in the US. It's about 6.4 over here in Europe because we have stupid sized bottles. But the whole idea of it is that it removes glass, like single-use glass waste from the system. So instead of a bar ordering a few bottles or ordering a case, they can order one of these. It comes with what they call a smart pour, which sits on top, which allows you to dispense from the keg. You can either dispense like an ounce, 2 ounces, or a full bottle. So you can refill your bottle direct from this. Then when it's empty, it's collected, replaced with a full one. It then goes back to the filling facility where it's washed and then refilled. So what you're doing is you're removing the waste. You know, we've all worked in bars, and the amount of empty bottles at the end of the night is enormous. And with this, it completely does away with all of that. So not only does it reduce carbon emissions, because for any product, the bottle, it has a huge embodied carbon footprint.
Mm-hmm.
It reduces the carbon emissions for the product. Also, it massively reduces waste. So in most countries, bars will pay for their waste on a volume or a weight basis. So by removing all that glass waste and all that cardboard waste, which is always just a nightmare to deal with, it's like, where the fuck do I put all this? Just builds up. The bar saves money as well, because for our cost of goods, you know, we're not having to produce bottles and labels and corks and shippers. We can offer the liquid at a slightly better price. And in certain markets, depending on how the tax system works, and for like in Hong Kong, for example, where it's based on price and not on the tax is based on price or cost rather than on alcoholic volume.
Mm-hmm.
It actually works out really, really cost effective. So bars can run a bit better margin. So everyone's really a winner in this. So it's great for the climate. It's great for bars. It's great for profit margins. It's great for the bottle crisis that we were all chatting about earlier. You know, everyone in the industry is struggling to get bottles right now because of COVID and the global supply chain issues. And because this is a closed loop system, it doesn't require any extra bottles. You know, once it's in, it's in. So.
No, I think it's a proofing company. I remember they came out with, was it 2 years ago?
It's the future. So it's the future of spirits distribution.
It's the future and the past, because spirits were sustainably distributed around the world up until about, the Industrial Revolution.
That's true, because they were shipped in barrels.
Yeah, in barrels.
And refilled in kegs. And
exactly.
you would keep a glass bottle because it was hand blown and it was precious. You would have your one glass bottle that you would refill.
I wonder if they're going to be able to get it approved here in the United States, because they're not big fans of refilling anything.
So I've had long conversations with Zdenek about this. What's super interesting is that US law is all based on precedent.
Mm-hmm.
So a judge will rule on something, and then that becomes the precedent for everything that follows. So every other judge will look back to that ruling and go by that ruling. So the ruling when it comes to the size of spirits containers relates to the label attached to the glass bottle.
Interesting.
If you notice on this, the label is not attached to the glass.
Right.
It's a plate that's attached to the aluminium frame, so it's not attached to the glass bottle. So that precedent doesn't apply to these.
Oh, interesting.
So this is the legal loophole they're trying to use to get around it.
There's so many legal loopholes. I mean, most of our laws are based on things from prohibition. So, one step at a time. I mean, there was the guy who got absinthe approved in the United States was just a lawyer who just happened to like absinthe and, just really fought against it. And when he found out why it was prohibited, it was because that one chemical within absinthe.
Fusion.
Yeah. He was like, okay. And he did all these scientific studies. He had doctors proving that literally this doesn't kill people. Yes, if you drink liters of it, anything, it's going to kill you.
You die from the alcohol first.
Yes, exactly. And he finally had that law thrown out, which we now have absinthe back in the United States. All right. So that was great. That was something we weren't even planning on talking about, but I think it ties in right into our story. Yeah. Definitely the fact that bottle shortage is definitely a thing, and it's probably not going to go away for some time. So
I think the only thing I would caveat on, Elaine, in terms of the bottle shortage and the frustration that I'm sure Robert shares, is that unfortunately, because you are the small independent startup and your volumes are minimal, not everyone has a shortage. The big corporates are still receiving their orders. It's the backlash is being faced. Already it's hard enough, right, to be small and independent. But add to that, then now we're the back of the queue. I mean, our bottle that we use is an off-the-shelf. It's the lightest weight bottle from Saver Glass. And we were informed that production that was going to happen in September isn't going to happen. They're going to maybe make some more in February of 2022. So potentially we're out of stock on our bottle for 9 months.
Wow. And Robert, you have the same problem, right? You had a 5-year contract?
Yeah, we had a 5-year contract. They came back and said, we can't supply you anymore. And, speculating, but I'm sure somebody went and,
someone went and bought them all.
Freak out and bought them all.
And then the worst, they go, just use another bottle.
Yeah.
And
you're
not so easy.
Specifically asked for that bottle for a specific reason. All right. So let's talk about, because all of you coming from Diageo and your roles within the company, there is a lot of things, because people who want to become brand owners, who are now brand ambassadors, I think it's important for them to realize what you should be learning now while on the job. What are the connections you should be building? What are the things, if you have a goal in mind, to start realizing what meetings you should be in, the people you should be talking to, so that you can learn the key things you might need to know if you're going to launch your own brand. And if you're not aware of it, it's like you all of a sudden you realize you're out of the company and you miss all the opportunities for all the free knowledge that you could have received.
Yeah.
So let's talk about that. Like some of the lessons, we'll talk. I guess Tim.
I think
some of the lessons you learned.
I think an important thing to say here is that probably the first thing to do is to realize what your strengths are, like what you're good at, and B, what you're really passionate about. For a lot of management, there's been this ethos of you've got to work on your weaknesses, and build your weaknesses, and you end up everything just ends up average.
Yes.
So instead of find out what you're really passionate about and what you're really good at, and focus on that, because then and find out what your weaknesses are, and then find people who are really passionate about your weaknesses or really good at your weaknesses, because they love to do that. And then you can build a team. So I'm really not a very good commercial person. But Steph is a really good commercial person. So we work really well together because I have almost zero interest and ability in doing the commercial side of things. Mm-hmm. My passion is in the sustainability and the branding and the liquid side of things. So together we work really well as a team. So I think that's a really important piece to learn, is to realize what you're really good at and what you really enjoy, and making sure you double down on that. Do some research. You have a base understanding of the other side of things.
Yes.
But don't try and just become average by being I'm not very good at commercial stuff, so I'm gonna get really good at commercial stuff, and I will I'll put the stuff that I'm passionate about aside. Because then also it doesn't become as enjoyable, right? Starting a brand is supposed to be enjoyable. It's a dream that we've all had. It's not meant to be a chore, as much as dealing with lawyers.
Departments, right? They have exactly accounting, commercial, marketing, branding, because they hired the specialists. And obviously, as a small company, you don't have that option. But finding a partner who can balance you out is really important. So that's a big thing to take
Don't
away.
get me wrong. I hate the admin. It is. I do it for our sake. I hate it, but I'm a control freak, so I'd rather do it than let him do it.
But you're good commercially. You're really
And the money.
good at
I don't even
having-
do the money either. I don't even think he has the PIN codes to any of the accounts. I do the money.
Steph's definitely the boss. But you're really good at those commercial conversations with distributors and the business side of things. And that's, I think, why we work really well together as a team. Don't get me wrong, you as a brand owner, you have to do bits of everything. You have to be a jack of all trades, but you've really got to focus as well on the things that you really, really enjoy. And because you're good at those things, and that's where you over-index for the business.
Mm-hmm. I mean, Stephanie, what did you take away? I mean, you've done, to Tim's point, you have the commercial side of the business because you did have a business degree coming in, and then you decided to go into the brand ambassador side because you love the education portion. But there had to be things like, you pulled away, working in a company on both sides of the business, because you did both sides while working with Diageo. Obviously, you probably stole borrowed some of the best lessons from them that you now apply to your business. Is there any one or two that stick out?
Well, I think brand ambassadors have a lot to learn from their colleagues, and the colleagues have a lot to learn from the brand ambassadors. But if what we're preaching here is like lessons for brand ambassadors, then ultimately it is the business side of things. Like, I would get incredibly frustrated at trainings within market BAs when I would ask them, let's say on Tanqueray at the time, well, what's the size of the Tanqueray opportunity here? What's your current case estimate? What's the forecast? What's the ambition? And they would say, oh, we're doing very well. I said, okay, yeah, much better than Hendrix. Great. What is that? What do you mean? Oh, well, we sell a lot.
Yeah.
And it was just sort of like, okay, guys, you've just joined the #1 biggest drinks company in the world. Congrats, well done, awesome. But with that, like, there comes so much opportunity for growth. And I understand that you're passionate about trade, cocktails, and that's fine. That's great. But there's so much more to the role, and there's so much more to the business. And if you can't understand where you sit within a P&L, and if you cannot understand what your impact needs to be for overall business performance, then you don't understand actually where your salary comes from. Mm-hmm. And if you don't understand where your salary comes from, then that's not going to be good for anyone. It's not going to be good for a small business or a big business. So I think for me, the biggest learning is lean into business acumen, take the finance for non-finance, like learn all the other stuff. Because of a traditional BA background, you probably haven't had that exposure unless you've been in operations in hospitality. And just, yeah, to Tim's point, like, I agree, your passion is what will make you, like, your true talent is what you need to like over index in, but don't miss the opportunity to learn so much more, because sometimes there might be something there that you didn't even know you loved, and you'll discover an entire new skill set. And I think that's really exciting.
No, absolutely. Like, sit in on meetings. We talk about this a lot on the show about asking your boss if you could sit in on meetings just to understand when they're doing the marketing plan, to understand what the strategy, what's the 5-year plan. Don't just be on the other end when they're presenting it. Can I be part of the process? Can I listen to how that process happens? How do you decide what you're going to be doing in the next 5 years? What are the steps that you're taking? And ask those questions. You don't have to contribute to the meeting. Just sit in it and take notes of like, okay, this is what's important. This is how they present their idea. This is how they come up with those goals for the next 3 years, 5 years. And why is it important to look 5 years down the road? Because as you said, if you're just about the passion, that's great. But it really does help to understand like where your salary is coming from and what the ultimate goal of the brand is. How many cases do they need to do this year and why? And how can I hit that goal?
And ultimately, a brand ambassador role is a fit into whatever damn job you want to have within an organization. It is like, there are so many career paths from it if you know how to lean in.
Absolutely. Robert, I know you took a lot of, you said, one of the things that you kind of borrowed a lot of things to help you with your own business about some of the plans and the planning from some of the inside people. It's important. How many decks I have from
same.
So many things and budgets and things. I'm like, yep, I'll just take those.
Yeah, there's a reason I saved them, and I got to work on some innovation brands too, so it was kind of cool to kind of see how to build a brand, and how figuring out like what your target audience is, and kind of the brand ethos of it. But I think the the main thing if you want to like really propel yourself, being a brand ambassador into the brand world is ask as many questions as possible. It's like I guess I've always been this way with anything that I do. It's like if I'm gonna do this, like I'll get super geeky and like put all my effort, 100% energy into it. So I used to drive my boss crazy, and she became like my first boss was a great mentor. And then different brand manager. She was a local manager for the Southeast, and then I started working closely more when I became a national ambassador with the brand team. So I'd ask them questions. I was interested about how much did the corks cost? How much did the glass cost? We changed glass. Like, what was that? How much do our labels cost? So I always ask like a bunch of questions. So I think that's a great way for just to learn. Ask questions, I would say.
Yeah. If you can get a degree at the company you're actually working for, so you're actually getting paid while you're learning, it is the best position to put yourself in. When I worked for Anheuser-Busch as a global manager, I was way out of my depth. They hired me. I was like, fuck it. If you're willing to hire me, I'm willing to figure out how to do this job. And I did. I got my MBA on the ground at the company. I was getting paid a lot of money and I was working with a lot of people who were from like Yale and Harvard, and they all had master's degrees in business. And I was like, I've been making drinks for the last 10 years, but I have a degree in marketing and communications. I just haven't utilized it in the last, because I've been working. And that was my own fault. I realized that I wasn't keeping up my own education when I went from the commercial side of the business. Like, I was the marketing person who was launching the brands in the marketplace for US Concepts. And when I switched to being a brand ambassador and the mixologist, I stopped learning. I stopped my education. I stopped asking those questions, and at a certain point, because it was all TV and glamour and all this stuff. And then I realized I got bored, and I was like, I really want to use my brain again, and I want to get back into it. So I think it's really important to keep your education up.
Absolutely.
Asking those questions, to be in those brand teams, because you're not going to stay in that role forever. You shouldn't want to stay in that role forever. You want to keep growing, keeps life exciting, and to one day maybe create your own brand or just do something else, like to jump into the role. But I was very grateful when I got to Anheuser-Busch. I mean, I was working 90-hour weeks to figure it out. And I was very grateful. I had a lot of great mentors who taught me. So I was like, oh, all right, I'm good now. I can create my own company. I figured I got all the education I need, and now I'm going to go do it for myself. And I'm constantly learning. I'm taking my master's degree now. I'm getting my master's as we speak. So I just think it's good to, when you're working for a large corporation, take advantage of the situation you're in and ask lots of questions.
100%.
I 100% agree. I would just add, I think also give, because when you go into these roles, you have a real unique skill set. And actually, some people will look to you because you'll be the cool kid. You'll be able to help them out with restaurant reservations. You'll be able to sort out that dude's perfect engagement proposal. And like that giving element is hugely important as well. Because if you can make yourself invaluable in that organization to the people working in that organization, then they will give you so much more.
Absolutely. Let's talk about that. Actually, it's one of the questions I have is about building networks, because all of your networks that all of you have built while working at Diageo and other roles are now helping you now. And, as you said, Steph, before, like, you didn't really need to test other people out on the brand because A, you had confidence in yourselves, right? You had each other. But 2, you were able to sell the brand without even them testing the liquid because people trusted you. So those are obviously networks that you had built over the course of the years. So let's talk about, like, what do you think that you did well, leaning into what you were just saying about, making the dinner reservations, being the cool kid who gets people like the CEO, like, into the cool places, like, so they get to know you as a person, not just, like, you're just not another brand ambassador, you're their brand ambassador. What are some things you think you did well and that other people, and some best practices that people should be doing right now to kind of build their network and maintain them?
Well, I think what's interesting and what I have reflected upon since sort of 2 years into Avallen is a lot of great things happened thanks to some quite senior people, but the most kind of out of the blue stuff were people I'd met earlier on in my career. And
they, people I'd even met at business school that rocked out of nowhere and invested £5,000 into our company. And it was sort of like going back to your previous self, the kind of, when you're in your 20s and that person, you're like, I didn't like that person. That person was crazy. But that person, whoever I was then, I seem to have done a lot of good things. People have come back and said, wow, you trained me such and such a day. And I remember you helped me out. And it's really, it changed the course of my career. And since then I've gone on and done this, and blah, blah, blah. And you just kind of are like, oh, I can't remember that person's name, but you were doing your job well with positive intent. You were caring, you were raising others, you were, as a good brand ambassador, connecting people, creating opportunities for them to learn and to grow. And that's just all come back threefold. So the boys can talk to networks and 50 best bars and all the wonderful, amazing things. But really for me, it was, that kind of earlier phase of life that's just come back into my mid 30s. And it's crazy. Karma is really beautiful.
Karma is, and I'm going to that point, raising people up, I think, is a big thing, because as a brand ambassador, you do have all these connections, and as you become more senior, people look to you to mentor them or ask them questions or train, and by sharing your knowledge and helping others grow, because there's so much room in our industry for everybody, right, to be successful. So I think that's such a great point, and it will come back. I look at it now, owning my own company, and the connections I have, and I think it's just being nice. Nice and like,
don't be a dick.
Yeah.
Just don't be a dick.
Just don't be a dick and be reliable. Robert, I went to, and Tim, I definitely want to talk. Robert, I know you talked about because getting a distributor, and we're talking about this, is one of the hardest things to do for the brand, but you use your old networks to kind of help you kind of get that first step in the door.
Steph is a genius at this.
Yeah. Okay. Very.
Yeah, it was a difficult process, because first they're like, get to 300 cases, and I knew this guy Rudy Ruiz, and he was working with Southern. He used to be the ex-Bacardi CEO. Known him for a long time, not well, but we'd always see each other out, and he knew that I was working with Diageo, and so when I was launching my brand, I was like, hey Rudy, I was like, I'm launching. He's like, what are you doing? I was telling him I'm launching my brand. He was like, come to my office. I was so excited, I emailed him, and he emailed me back right away, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is great, it's the largest supplier. I was so happy. And he was like, how many cases are you selling? And I was like, I don't know, I think like 100. And he was actually like, well, we don't really take brands until you get to 3,000-4,000 cases. And I was like, well, we're totally different. You should try us. And he was like, that's what everybody says. I'm like, no, but we are different. And he was like, that's what everybody says to follow up. And he was like, you know what? I like you. He was like, I've been in this business a long time. He was like, just get to 2,000 cases, and come back and talk to me. I was like, what the hell? I was so brokenhearted. So yeah, I mean,
meeting. That's a big thing.
He did take my meeting, but it was an interesting meeting after that. But kind of pushed me out of the office because I was like, you got to try it. I was trying to get him to try it. He was just like, I'm not trying it. He's like, we tried this at Bacardi many years. It didn't work. I was like, okay, you're going to regret this. Anyways, he's like, I like your passion, kid. Come back and see me.
Well, now you have somebody to sell it to. But you did get a distributor, and that's but your networks helped you get your first distributor.
Yeah. So my first, one of my first, it was like my third investor actually. His family owned Breakthrough Beverage, so it was a strategic, investor that we got. So that was a big
sexy investor
for us. Yeah. So and he fell in love with the brand in the early stages, and his great grandfather actually was Heron Walker, so he loved the fact that he used to produce liqueurs as well. And his other side of the family was, from Sunbelt Charmer, which is now Breakthrough. And his dad was the co-chair of it. And actually, his dad was like, what are you doing investing into a passion fruit liqueur? It's brown spirits. So it's kind of cool. He tells that story of how
Do you have their number? Hello?
Yes, I can introduce you for sure.
But now
it wasn't a silver bullet.
Investors should be working for a distributor in a big family. Bring them in early.
Yeah, I mean, it launching other markets, it was like, hey, I'll open the door for you, but you still have to go and sell them. And then he pretty much said, in their local teams, they had to green light it. So, we didn't green light all of the markets with them. We're still not in every market with them. So we took it slow, and, we proved ourselves in a couple different markets, and then we slowly expanded because, you don't want to, obviously, we were still trying to figure out production. And so we didn't want to, overpromise and underdeliver on our end as well. And, my partner, was very worried about that being his family company. So, obviously, like, I didn't want to let him down as well with that. So he was a little bit nervous about, kind of pushing the full throttle with like a big grand scheme launch that still hasn't, happened today. I think we're in about, I think they're in 15 markets, and I think we're in about 11 of them right now. So
that's impressive. First one.
That was a huge.
And organic growth is just, it's applaudable. It's genuine. It's from the ground up. It's, bottle by bottle, bar by bar. Like, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Tim, that's your ethos as well. I mean, Tim, for you, I mean, getting in this, I guess we'll go into the distributor story for you guys because you're in around the world, but like is there anything your networks that helped you get there?
Yeah, well, I was very fortunate in my career at Diageo that I got to work extremely closely with someone who I believe to be one of the great founders, drinks brand founders of the modern era. And I used to get to spend a lot of my time with him, and that was Tom Bullitt, a guy who built a brand that's almost 2 million cases today.
Mm-hmm.
And until recently was working on the brand on a daily basis. So, having a mentor like that taught me such a huge amount, and the one thing that Tom really instilled in me and beat into me every single day was that, like, we're not in the business of selling drinks, we're in the relationship business. This entire business is about relationships. So focus on the relationships, because you can always find someone to do the finance, you can always find someone to do the accounts, to do the marketing, but make sure that your relationships are as strong as they can possibly be, because they will ultimately be the downfall or the success of your business. And it's been so true for Avallen. From a distributor point of view, I can take zero credit for our distributors. It's all down to Steph. Steph did a year working for a Colombian rum brand, La Hechicera, and it was that year that she spent there working as their global sales manager, working with all the distributors of La Hechicera. Like, so many of those distributors are now Avallen distributors. Like, I remember I went to meet our UK distributor, the owner of it, Nick Gillett. And I went to meet him, and I sat down and we started talking. And he said, I took a meeting. Steph had met him a couple of weeks before. He said, I took a meeting with Steph because we worked together on the Hechicera and I really like her. So I took the meeting out of courtesy. And I went into the meeting and I was going to say, I like your product. And I was going to give her some advice and send her on her way. He said, by the end of the meeting, I'd bought 3 pallets.
That does say a lot about you, Steph. And
that really set the tone for every distributor meeting we've ever had. Like, Steph,
but it genuinely wasn't my intent at the time. I didn't think it'd buy any. I genuinely was like, hey, have a chat.
Yeah. Well, actually, I mean,
nice guy.
And Tim, you give Stephanie, and rightfully so, the great props, and you actually lead me to my other question, because you went from working for a very large corporation like Diageo, and then you went to go work for the smaller rum brand, which I think has become, from what you told me yesterday, something I would actually recommend is almost like a course for other people who want to then start their own brand. Because if you are working for a big company, obviously you only get to work on a small piece of the business, right? It's very important, but it's small. But when you go work for a small company, especially if it's not your own, you get to, if it is your own, you're doing it all. But if you work for somebody else, you get to do everything. So talk about that experience and how that kind of helped set you up. Like, it sounds like a great recommendation to people, like, go work for a small company.
It is so valuable. And I am very grateful for my year with La Hechicera, and it wasn't easy. I left this fantastic gig with a great salary, tons of T&E, markets, team support. But I suppose I took a gamble, and they did also. They were family owned. They really didn't have employees. Everyone was a founder or had equity share. And it was that passion for Colombia and that kind of desire to I think at that point I already wanted to give back. I wanted to have the opportunity to be myself. And during my time at Tanqueray, you know, I'd wear the green dress, I'd paint my nails red, I had my gold pineapples, and I was Miss Tanqueray. And I wanted to work out who I was. And Colombia is a huge part of my upbringing, but just also my personality and my character. And so to step into the kind of shoes of representing Colombia's premium rum brand that has now been acquired by Pernod Ricard was pretty awesome, because these kids, and they're not kids, you know, they're our age, they are Laura, Miguel, Marta, so smart, so switched on, and they had a very clear vision of what they wanted to do and what they wanted to deliver, and they definitely couldn't afford me at the time, and I definitely didn't want to back down on what I was worth, and in the end we found a compromise. But then they just kind of went, there, here's everything. And like here's everything, like, you know, the Dropbox where you can open every folder, because at Diageo you can't open any of the fucking folders. They will just come up with passwords and codes and locks. But then I just like had the keys, and I was like, whoa, this is a P&L. These are your value chains. These are the cost of goods. And I just sit there reading and learning, and then they expected me to know all of this, of course, right? And that was definitely the bautizo de fuego. But that kind of gave me the perspective to go, ooh, but I could do this. Hold on. And I think that's when we had that dinner and we were playing around with the idea. And from you know, a year prior having no idea where to start, to a year later going, I absolutely know where to start, was a huge learning curve. And again, incredibly grateful for my year with them.
Yeah, and me just going, what's the value chain?
Yeah.
Can we just save the world? You deal with the value chain. I just want to save the world.
I just want to save the world. But let's talk about like going to value chains, and also just going a little bit back. And to just kind of emphasize what Stephanie was saying, I do think that's such a valuable thing. But you obviously also put the effort in to learn all the stuff, like to sit there and take it all on and to spend hours like getting to know their brand and understanding the business on a even deeper level than you had before when you were at Diageo, which says a lot about you and your work ethic. And now that has paid off, we're talking about distributors, because I get this question all the time, and I'm sure.
How'd you get a distributor? Yeah,
distributor like Tony, who's on here, who has his own brand. He's launching a tequila brand. He has a great gin. I don't know if he's still watching, but that is the hardest part for most small brands.
Route to market and cash, right? Like they're the killers.
Yeah. Any recommendations? So
I think a really good way of doing it, and something that we do a lot, is speak to other small brands. Go out there and go, ask your friends who are other small brand owners and say, hey, who's your distributor? Who do you recommend in this country? I've recommended multiple brands to distributors in the UK, the brands that I really like that are small, looking for distributors. So go out there and ask people that have distributors already, like, hey Rob, can we get an introduction to your distributors, that kind of thing. And quite often it's because you're the distributor, you like the distributor, hopefully the distributor, you want to kind of be in their favor, so you want to kind of maybe help their portfolio. You're like, oh, well, our distributor's good, we want to kind of be in their good books. So that's a really good strategy as well. As I said, it's a relationship business now. We've got a relationship. Nick St. Mangrove really trusts us, really loves our brand. We deliver for him. So when we do more,
we do more than our brand. We
help them with their sustainability. We give a bit more, and then so when we introduce brands to him, he is already of that opinion, like, well, this must be a pretty decent brand already, otherwise they wouldn't introduce it to me. So you've already you've got a foot in the door already, rather than that cold calling.
Yep, that makes sense. Robert, you're going to say something.
I would say, finding a distributor is very tough, and a lot of people think, oh, once I get a distributor, my sales are going to go through the roof. And it's not the case. Like, you can't really expect them to do much, I would say. No disrespect to distributors.
Move from one warehouse to another one.
They have so many brands, they have so many goals, and they're looking, especially right now, if you're with a bigger distributor, they have Pernod Ricard or Bacardi, they're behind on those goals. So that's the focus, because there's big bonuses drawn off that. So, it's hard to get them, and that's how they make their money, is the bonus, to focus on, your little brand, with not much bonus. And even if you do pay a bonus, it's like you have these other priority brands there. So it's definitely not a silver bullet. You definitely need your own people in the market if you want to be successful. But obviously you need somebody who's going to be able to deliver, your cases, as opposed to, some of a smaller distributor who, might not have a sales force. They might only deliver once a week or twice a week. Luckily, a lot of the distributors now would deliver, at least 3 times. They're delivering 5 days a week, but, they'll see accounts, twice a week. Where at some it's like, once a week, and, then they don't want to deal with like another invoice. They only want to have like a couple of distributors. They don't want to deal with a small one and have to worry about paying another bill just, for your brand or a couple of brands. So that's one of the benefits of, being with a bigger distributor.
Yeah.
I think I would also say that bigger is not always better.
No, not at all. Some of my
because it's, as you rightly said, the bigger distributors will be with the bigger brands, and that's their focus. So it's choose your distributors wisely.
Yeah.
We've got some distributors who are absolutely fantastic and absolutely knock it out of the park, adore Avallen, and then we've got other distributors who like barely reply to an email, and you're like, they bought one pallet, and you're like, are you going to buy any more? Like, are you actually selling any?
But they're the people that don't understand the vision and mission ultimately. And that's the learning for us, right? It doesn't matter the size of the distributor. It's do they get what we're trying to do, and do they share the values? But I suppose my parting words on the distribution thing is ultimately like the power of recommendation. And I actually think this is where network does kick in, network and reputation. We wouldn't have got the meetings we've had if we weren't ex-Diageo, right? So even the way that our distributor now presents us to some of the retailers is Tim and Steph, ex-Diageo, have gone on to do this, and it always sets a bar and a tone for they know what they're doing. And ultimately that
how
unfortunately. But unfortunately, it's not something that I could recommend you do. It's you got to live, you got to learn, you got to do, you got to meet, you got to be. There is honestly overnight success surely doesn't exist, and if it does, then kudos to whoever that is. But like you have to put in the yards, the time, and it might happen, and it might not.
No, it might not, but it's also it is true. Like when the distributor especially doesn't have to explain you. They could just say, a name that somebody recognizes. It does open the door.
And the power of recommendation, So when you've got other influential people who know what you're doing, like what you're doing, and put you forward for things, then actually they've helped you do sort of 70% of the hard work. And then if you can't come in and nail that pitch, then you're in the wrong job, right? It's you're fucked up, right?
Yeah. No, absolutely. Go ahead, Tim.
I 100% agree with Steph. Otherwise, I get in trouble.
Thank God we're business partners.
Thank goodness your business partner. And eventually, obviously, it comes down to the point where, like, when you
that happens all the time,
then you don't have to have that explanation anymore. It just comes down to this is Stephanie and Tim of Avallen, and what it is.
Yeah.
And then as you build that up, you don't have to have that explanation. But it's good to have something that kind of people can, look back upon, and just, it's why we have bios, like used to work at Diageo or used to work at, Anheuser-Busch. Even Bar Rescue helps me to this day, like saying I was on Bar Rescue. I know, which is so sad.
But you are so right. It's why you have bios. It's why you have a LinkedIn. It's
I think another thing that I want to mention, and because we don't have much time left, and it links back into the distributor, but also a wider conversation, is that, like, both Stephanie and I with Avallen, Robert with Chinalo, even your husband with Old Duff, they're all brands that don't follow a trend. No one's set out to create this brand because Robert didn't go like, ooh, passion fruit liqueur is trending, or I've seen the future and it's the porn star martini, so I'm going to create it's all passion. But like it goes back to the old Henry Ford saying, like, if Henry Ford said, if I asked people what they wanted, they would have said faster horses.
Yeah.
try and look for a market opportunity or a trend, or follow your heart. Do you either find a problem that needs solving and go and try and solve it, or find something that's linked to you really deeply and passionately, and go with it and go with your heart. Don't try and create a brand just for the money, because you'll get lost. You know, if you're like, oh, I'm going to create the world's best gin, you're like, this is what everybody else is trying to do.
Yeah.
There's a brand that really, really inspires me, and a good friend of Stephanie and mine. It's called Spirited Union.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a rum from the Netherlands, but it was Ruben was the founder. Worked for Bowls, and he went out to create. And he saw spice rum, and he thought spice rum is a bit naff. So I'm going to create botanical rum. He saw like a kind of gin, so he created this thing that he called botanical rum, and everyone looked at him and went, "You're what? You're what?" And he did it from a passion. He didn't follow any trends. And now, if you look at almost every single rum producer is now making botanical rum, or calling their spice rums botanical rums. Mm-hmm. And he created an entire category. Like Ben Branson from Seedlip saw a problem. He said, right, I don't drink, and I'm sick and tired of going out and having Coke or a cup of tea or a glass of water and being Billy No Mates when I go out. Surely there's got to be a better solution for this. Like, all my friends are drinking cocktails. He saw a problem, and he went and solved that problem, and now has almost single-handedly created one of the most exciting categories in drinks today, the no ABV category. And it's just exploded, and it all came back from Ben going, I don't accept having a glass of water when I go to a cocktail bar.
No, I think those are great points.
Yeah.
It must be something, solving a problem or something you're passionate about. I mean, I think it's hard to create something if you don't really like drinking it.
Yeah.
Robert, you must love Passion Fruit and Porn Star martinis. I can just see you drinking them all day. But I know that you were passionate about, and you like the people that you're working with, and which is amazing. And I know we're getting kind of to the end of the hour, but I did want to touch upon something that we've kind of a little over, but that's okay. This is a good conversation. So, Robert, I did want you mentioned about something about having people in the marketplace, because the biggest mistake I see people, and people call me all the time, they're like, I need a brand ambassador. And I'm like, you don't need a brand ambassador. They're like, no, we really want to hire brand ambassadors. I'm like, you need a market manager. You need somebody who's actually going to sell your product. I said, and then you can hire a brand ambassador.
Because you already have a brand ambassador, because the founder is the greatest brand ambassador a brand will ever have.
It's so true. I'm not saying you should not hire brand ambassadors. I'm just saying
no.
She's out of work, Tim.
Yeah,
just
exactly.
Out of the business.
I'm out of the business. Nobody will need my training academy ever again. No, but it is true. But it's not the first person you should hire.
Exactly. Yeah.
You are, as the brand owner, the best brand ambassador your brand could ever have. And Robert, I want you to talk about, because you have done, this is your model of, you have market managers, and then you have put part-time brand ambassadors out there. So I'd love you to kind of talk, because I know a lot of people ask me about this. So can you talk about the model? Because it seems to be working for you, like what you have done.
Yeah, so I think, you can have both. And, there's a lot of bartenders out there that are looking to aspire to do different things. They want to get out of bartending. They want to become a brand ambassador, go work for a supplier, distributor. And they have some days off, or they work at night. They can do some work during the day. There's a lot of things that go on during the day with accounts, with whether it's retail, or accounts that are open for lunch. So I think having the combination of a market manager that kind of understands the business structure, that can work with the distributor, that can work with kind of the budgets and everything, and then help teach a part-time brand ambassador. So, I set it up in kind of 3 phases, because it's not obviously for everybody, so we started it off on like an ad hoc basis, gave them,
the part-time
it was like, $200 or something per menu placement, certain amount of staff trainings, they got paid. And then if they felt like it was a good fit and, they were actually doing some work, then, I put them on a retainer for like a part-time role. And then they had a set KPIs that we aligned on, some account visits, menu placements, and staff trainings and events. And then after that, once they hit those goals, and we would pay them a bonus once they hit those KPIs that we aligned on. And then I think that's a good way to kind of build into, a full-time role. We don't have a full-time ambassador right now, but we do have some part-time ambassadors.
Yeah.
So I think that's a good way to kind of grow, because they can kind of, they're very connected, the bartending community, and they know a lot of people, they have a lot of relationships. And I think it's just a good segue into, seeing if it's a fit, not only for ourselves, but also for them.
No, and I like the fact that you talk about the ad hoc, because I think that's the biggest problem. I've seen many people do this in many different ways. And I like the idea you're not giving them a salary. It kind of shows their drive. Like if there's somebody who really wants to do it and they know it might lead to a part-time role that also is a salary, it's like, okay, if I do these things, I make these placements, I'm showing you that I actually have effort. Because I've had, and you told me this too, like you've had people out there, you've hired them, given them a retainer, and then they're not actually delivering any of the things, and you don't know what they're doing with their time. But by giving them this ad hoc with goals, and they get paid for what they do, and then as they show their work, like that they're doing it, then it's like, all right, this is something you obviously can balance your full-time job and this job at the same time. Let's create a retainer. And the one thing I have definitely known from Tracy Eden, who's my friend, who's a part-time brand ambassador, and we just did a talk about this at BCB, was you have to pay them what is worth a shift. Like you can't expect them to take off a day of work. Like if you want them to only work 3 or 4 days a week at the bar, and for you for 2 days, it has to be at least $300 or whatever their bar shift would be for them to spend that day working for you. And that's a fair trade. And then give them reasonable goals. I've had people try to use part-time brand ambassadors as full-time brand ambassadors. Like the goals were insane. I'm like, there's no way that person can achieve any of that. A full-time brand ambassador can't achieve that. You got to realize what you're paying for. But it has worked for you, Robert. Like it seems to be a successful model so far.
Yeah, no, it has. It's a good, I think, kind of like vetting, I guess, process and learning process of seeing if like I said, it's a good fit for both of us.
Yeah. Do you have any part-time people out there, or?
I think the route to market in the US is incredibly unique compared to some of the other European markets and rest of the world, right? So because of your three-tier system, et cetera, there's like real complications who can do what and how you have to get people in independently to engage outside from the distributor and the whole shebang. So for us, we don't really have anyone part-time from an affordability perspective. We're just not there yet. However, we have, our business model is through distributors. So they're country distributors, right? So they, for example, in the UK, have the brand, and they then work with wholesales regionally and nationally up and down the country. But they themselves have a sales team of about 30 people. So our work is really to go and spend as much time with those 30 people, try and get them as engaged and enamored and add as much value as we possibly can, bring them out to Normandy. And even though in their 30-day week, we know we've maybe only got about 3 days of their time, it's trying to kind of almost win them over, heart and soul, so that even though we're still the little guy, they always want to try and get us in.
No, that's great. Bring making the salespeople your advocates is such a good business model.
100%.
For anybody and anywhere.
Yeah.
And we know who we'd hire, right? If we could afford to hire people, we would a whole list of like, you would be our brand ambassador, you would do that. Oh my God, you would be. But
yeah, we've also kind of kept things deliberately lean, from an overhead point of view. So we've outsourced as much as possible.
Yeah.
But I think it's a great point Steph makes, is that we've made a real focus to make sure we make the frontline salespeople feel really special. So then they all love our brand. So I think it's a great point for anyone thinking about starting a brand as well. You don't just need to have conversations with the top people at the distributor. Go and take out the sales guys for dinner. Go and have drinks with them. Buy them birthday cards, because those are the guys that are doing the actual selling. Mm-hmm. And to them, for them, they're the sales guys. And if the brand owner turns up for them, buys them drinks, takes them out, to them, that's really, really special.
Yes.
I remember at Diageo, like when you got to meet like
Lorena,
you know, these were like you felt special, like getting to hang out at Bob Nollett's house.
Absolute
hang out in
privilege.
his swimming pool with his kids, and you know, like this is a real privilege for me because I'm just just a small cog at Diageo, and yet I get to hang out with this super important person. So, and again, it goes back to that. It's a relationship business, you know, and you've got to build relationships with people top to bottom. And I know on our call yesterday, that's one of the skills that brand ambassadors really, really have, is that ability to be able to adjust your conversation depending on who you're talking to. You know, you've got to be able to talk to the bartender in the dive bar, and also be able to talk to the director or the CEO of the company. And you've got to be able to tailor your conversation style to be able to talk to a hugely wide range of people. And that's a really great skill that brand ambassadors have that is really, really useful when you become a brand owner as well.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. And if it's not one you have immediately, it's something you should learn how to do it. It's like I always say, look for the most charming person you know and figure out, like, why are they so charming? And it's usually because they don't talk a lot. Usually they ask you a lot of questions about yourself and know you, and they care. Right?
I think yeah, Tim said it right. You have to be able to know your audience and, you know, be able to adapt. And I think that's one of the best things, you know, that hospitality taught you, because, you know, for 12 years or whatever I worked in hospitality, or however long, you deal with so many different people. So like within like a minute, you know, you already know, or probably less than a minute, does that person want recommendations? Do they just want to be left alone? You know, so you can identify, you know, kind of who that person is, and, you know, better cater to them. So I think that was a huge plus for me from coming from the hospitality industry.
Yeah, absolutely. I think those are all great skills to learn. So if you are coming from the bartending world, taking those skills in and being able to adjust to any client that's sat in front of you or any customer there, they still apply while being a brand ambassador. All right, so we have to wrap it up because we have been talking for a while, and I have to go off to work actually. So
are you like rocking a shift today?
I'm actually rocking a shift. I rock a shift
Good woman.
1 day a week on a boat.
As I said, get us into New York.
Oh.
Let us in. Let us into America.
Yeah, it is. It's a lot of fun to be able to I bartend on a boat 10 hours a week, and it's so much fun. I really have.
I'm coming the next time.
Yeah,
that's what we just talked about. That kind of conversational skills. That's the single best way to develop them, is to go and do a bar shift. The single best way you can do it.
Absolutely.
So if you don't have those skills,
customers,
if you don't have those skills, go and get some bar shifts. And given the chronic staffing crisis that's going on in hospitality right now, it's the easiest thing in the world to pick up a bar shift.
Absolutely. It's how I got mine.
So.
They were like,
why are you doing yours for free, Tim? Tim's doing bar shifts for free. I'm like, are you getting paid? He's like, no.
Yeah.
No, I'm just helping out because I love the trade.
I do. I am loving it. All right, so we're gonna wrap it up.
Awesome.
Okay, so I always like to end with this one question, which is basically it's advice. So if there's one thing you have learned from launching a brand that you would like to tell somebody else, if they're about to launch their own brand, you know, and you want to give them one piece of advice. There's so much advice I know you'd like to give them, but one piece of advice, something you learned maybe the hard way that you would like to share with them, like either to do this or not to do something. What would it be, Stephanie?
I think for me, it's understanding that the thing you create is not your own. It sounds abstract, but maybe you have a daughter, I believe, right?
Yeah.
Like it's your guardianship. Yes, you created it, you birthed it, but your job is to look after it, and other people will interact with it and they will have a relationship with it. So you need to nurture it and you need to protect it. But ultimately for me, like the detachment from Avallen as it being me has been really crucial also to my mental well-being and an ability to sleep at night, right? So I think it's understanding that you create something which is a separate entity that has its own energy, that will interact and go out in the world, and then it's almost like a guardianship role versus an ownership role.
I think that's a great point because it really does help with your mental health to have that feeling. Yeah, it's amazing. Tim?
I'm going to quote Nike here, just do it. Just the time will never be perfect. Don't wait. just go and fucking do it. Like, I wish I'd done it a long time before. You sit there going like, oh, I don't know if I have the skills. I don't know if I can do this. The only way you'll find out is if you just go and try. So just go and fucking do it. You'll learn on the way. Don't wait for it to be perfect, because it never will be. Yes. I speak to people that go, oh, I spent 3 years perfecting the recipe for my rum. I'm like, what the fuck were you doing?
Yeah, and it's still not out.
Right, you failed. Like, write a really tight brief. Just get it out there. You can improve it once it's out there. Look at that. Mark Zuckerberg didn't wait for this current iteration of Facebook we have right now to launch Facebook. He just went, oh, here's a thing. Let's put it out there, and then you constantly iterate and improve it over time.
Yes.
Take that approach. So just fucking do it. That's my advice.
No, I think that's great words of advice. Somebody just launched a brand. You'll figure it out. Just keep improving it along the way. And when you get it out there in the world, that's when you get the feedback, like real feedback to keep improving the message. And hi, Diana.
Feedback is a gift.
Hi, Diana.
Hello.
Robert, yourself?
Like what Tim said, just do it. And just to add on to it, do it well. Do it with passion, because if you're not passionate about it, then I don't think you'll be successful. And then, don't give up, and expect the unexpected, and it's okay, because it's a learning lesson. So, there's many times I wanted to throw in the towel, and, you get kicked in the nuts and hit in the back of the head like every day by things you never thought were imaginable. So it's going to happen. Don't give up. Brush it off and keep going and do it well.
No, I think those are all really great advice, because it's not going to be easy. It's not going to be perfect, right?
No.
You're constantly
You're going to be poor. So poor.
So poor.
Yes.
You're going to miss.
I don't own a car right now.
No, neither do I.
All the old people, you're like, so when I bought you all those drinks on TV?
Yeah.
Can you get me dinner? I'll pay you back in 5 years.
I live in a shed. I know I live in a shed. The other piece of advice I'll say is that find a friend that speaks lawyer.
Legal.
Yeah.
If you've got a friend that understands lawyer, they're worth their weight in gold.
That's absolutely. I think that's especially really important. Legal is definitely important, and I do agree with you. Those friends, I'm very happy. Like, some brand ambassadors now are buying me dinner. I'm like, oh, this is what this is like.
Yeah.
Damn it! I hang out with brand managers, wrong people.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, they don't have any money. The brand ambassadors.
Ambassadors have no money anymore either.
That is so true. Well, everybody, this was great.
Thanks so much for hosting us. It's been awesome.
Yes, it was awesome. It was great catching up with.
It was great to see you. Be well. Get out of your shed, Tim.
A big kiss to Miami and New York from us. Honestly, tell them to let us in.
To England, right? Everybody's in England right now.
I'm in Amsterdam. But
you're in Amsterdam.
Same difference.
Not very different.
Well, cool. Very different.
Bye, guys.
Bye, guys.
Bye, everyone.